I think we're good. All right, YouTube, AAA here, wanting to give you a review reviewing 2017 with Duff here. Duff, go ahead, say hello.
Hi, everybody.
All right, so today we're going to do a political slash not political, just general review of 2017. Obviously, we'll cover politics, but more things in general. And to start things off, to get some of the bigger topics out of the way, I was going to just say that it's been a interesting and entertaining, I guess you could call it, year or maybe even a few months with our brand new president there. He's done some things we like, some things we don't like, and overall has made some major accomplishments and other crazy tweets this year. But overall, he's definitely not been the not done been as crazy as I had thought. Definitely. So I am surprisingly happy so far with everything that's gone on in the presidency. I'm not surprisingly figuring that the media has played a small game and still killing themselves over not winning their prized Clinton, but such is life kind of deal. And overall, I think it's been a fairly good year. I mean, again, media has not been too kind to anything that's been done overall, unless you're calling somebody out. But it's been, fairly good with what's been happening. Even going into the entertainment field. But any overview or any generalizations for either, Duff?
Yeah, 2017. It's been a year of a lot of different stuff, but I think it's also been a year of a lot of noise that's disproportionate to actually what went on. So yeah, American news media coverage of the election and lead up to the election played a huge part of the beginning of the year, and then the feud between Trump and the news media has dominated aspects of every other month of the year. But internationally and stuff like that, or even here in Canada, it's kind of like, there's not actually a whole lot that happened in 2017. A lot of saber rattling out of places like North Korea, and there have been terrorist attacks and things like that too. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking back, and it's like, so what makes 2017 memorable, other than the Trump stuff? And it's like, I'm not too sure.
That's that's pretty fair. I mean, there aren't well, and to be fair, that's the media doing their due diligence to not cover other important issues. I'm not sure how much you know. I've been reading some things, not CNN or other major media outlet related, but on the media that I've been listening to, major accomplishments, Trump or not Trump wise, there has been the success of the military destroying the majority of ISIS. There's kind of something pretty big deal. Everything besides the tax plan regulations. If you're a technology whiz, we had the release of the Android phones, which are pretty cool. I might myself buy a new phone from Android here. We had the release of the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus with the iPhone X, which I think is very stupid, but that's we'll get there eventually. And then if you are in the electric car field, we had Tesla announce their creation, or they're going to start ramping up production for the Tesla truck. That's not the name of it, but I don't remember the name and that kind of deal. So there have been accomplishments in that field as well. And I guess the biggest change this year, and this is, I mean, it was started before, but it's been much more. The outcries have been much louder this year. Is just the uh, social justice warriors and their fight attempt, I guess, to make things fair and balanced and equal and all that kind of stuff. That's been a much bigger voice, in my opinion, overall. I mean, it's been there recently and previous years, but this year was definitely laws and the media and just society has kind of really had to deal with all of their crying and what have you kind of deal. Would you say that that might be true, U.S. and Canada wise, there, Duff, or maybe just in the U.S. overall, or?
Um, yeah, no, it's hard to say, but if we start like looking through news stories, so of course we go all the way back to January last of this year, but January 2017, of course, we have Donald Trump being sworn in, but we also have soon after that. Remember, on the 21st, we had the Women's March. which is one of those events where at the time it was made much of, because I think it was something like 2 million people marched on the White House claiming to fight for women's rights and for, just positive stuff. And we had the emergence of Linda Sarsour as one of the leaders of that women's movement. But it's also one of those news items where it was not nearly as impactful as it might have been, partially because a lot of the stuff which was being protested was stuff which has already had laws made to prevent those things from happening. So it ended up being a lot of hullabaloo for not a lot of payoff.
Yeah, that's true. Some people just want to be, heard and yelled and have their little 5 minutes online or on YouTube kind of deal. Want to know, in your opinion, Jeff, do you think that since all of the yelling and outcrying has been happening so much this year, do you think that now things will die down next year? They'll be the same, or things will get worse?
Well, I'm curious to see what'll happen because, of course, North Korea is saber rattling again. You have a lot of unhappy members of the UN, partially because of Trump essentially saying, guys, if you're not actually going to follow along with the things we would like you to do, why should we keep on paying you aid money when even that aid money doesn't appear to be being put to good use? So I don't know if things are going to get worse so much as things are going to continue to be different from the narrative that, let's say, Obama was trying to push when he was in office. I think there's going to be a lot more international news where leaders are going to be going after other leaders, where previously people like Angela Merkel, Obama, who's the current president of France, but also Trudeau here in Canada, we're all on the same page, and I don't think we're going to be seeing that. So we might actually get a bit more political back and forth at the highest levels.
Oh, FYI, that would be Emmanuel
Uh,
Macron, if I'm
yeah,
pronouncing it right.
Americon, yeah,
Oh,
or
okay.
Macron.
I'm not French, I don't know.
Yeah, but it's like if we jump out of January, it looks like so we have the first of North Korea trying to test its intercontinental ballistic missiles. And that's a story which actually carried all the way through the year because they have, of course, launched ones which have been able to go into the Pacific Ocean. And in doing so, created a lot of unease. And you have people not wanting to go to the Olympics that are happening I think, in Seoul, in South Korea, coming up in February, because of the fear of what North Korea is doing.
Well, I know that is to me, that's crazy. Well, and so I guess this has been the first year that they've become not a threat. I mean, they've always been kind of a threat, but it's the first year I think that Americans have kind of been paying more attention to that whole fiasco. Would you say that that's probably true?
Well, I actually wouldn't know because once again, not in the States, but it definitely is a period where we see North Korea ramping up its rhetoric quite a lot. Probably more so because China appears to be less and less interested in propping them up. So they're going to try and make noise to annoy the Americans and hope to get back into China's good graces, perhaps. Or maybe just Kim Jong-un wants to take a slightly more aggressive stance towards international politics because he figures he can get more out of the community that way.
Yeah, that's fair too. I can see what you're saying there. That's I don't. I mean, the whole. I wish people, especially our generation or my generation, knew more about what was going on and cared more, and didn't just have their 5 minute little CNN or MSNBC, CBS, ABC, and whoever just said this, so that's what's going on. Because of course, there's been a long history of issues with this countries, but it's just I don't know. I even heard a story, not recently now, but I guess it was a few months ago, where people talked about, oh yeah, I'd rather live in North Korea than in America, and I'm like, what? So just the the thought of us not really understanding what's going on is scary. So, and I guess to that point, do you think now this election has caused people to kind of do some more soul searching about their political views, or maybe has made them even more I don't care about politics? Or do you think it goes either way there, Duff?
Um, well, from what we see in terms of engagement from the media, they clearly want to make it look like people are caring more about their politics, or at least expressing political beliefs a lot more strongly than perhaps in previous years. But we also have a whole bunch of information and news stories which ended up being fake news in and of themselves. So prior to Donald Trump being elected at the beginning of this year, we had tons of people saying, oh, why don't we move to Canada? Wouldn't it be great if we moved to Canada if Trump gets elected? And we had celebrities saying that, and we had people online kind of endorsing that. And even some people I met who had come from the States were like, yeah, we're going to try and get to Canada because things will still be good here. And as far as I know, there hasn't been a mass exodus of the United States' population up here to the north. And as far as I know, no celebrities actually relocated. So I think, once again, it's the media trying to portray something in order to get people to think a certain way, or to be more predisposed to acting in the way which the media thinks is preferable. And in this case, they'd be voting for the Democrats. But I don't know if that actually tells us anything deeper about the political persuasion or the political thoughts of the American people themselves, other than we have Republicans and we have Democrats. And within those parties, there's a diverse enough set of views that you have to question whether or not the fact that there is only two parties in the States accurately reflects how the different people within those parties want to act, either unilaterally or within the parties themselves.
Yeah, it's become fairly divisive and confusing overall, I think. I wish that we had more. I wish that the independents would have had a better run when they could have, because this could have been their time to rise and shine. But unfortunately, their candidate was not, we'll say, suited to combat Clinton and President Trump. So that's just really unfortunate there. But no, I'm hoping the well, I mean, in regards to just knowledge about what's going on, I mean, uh the internet itself was, I mean, I don't say at stake, but it was voted on recently with the whole net neutrality deal, and that was basically the power there was taken away from the government, which was pretty good in my opinion, because I just agree with Mr. Shapiro in saying that I don't think the government should control what it doesn't need to, and it didn't really need to do that. And of course, a lot of people, even people that live with me, do not agree with that kind of thing. But I don't think that I think that the market will show if that was a good idea or not. But overall, hopefully, we kind of get our acts together, and it's we care more kind of deal. But I think that overall, it's the information wise has been much better off. So I don't know. Do you see promise next year there, Duff?
With the whole net neutrality thing,
Yeah, the whole
that,
internet information deal.
yeah, that's actually a bit of a weird one. I actually had someone here saying, "Oh, isn't it terrible that the U.S. has gotten rid of net neutrality?" And I was like, "What do you actually mean by that?" And they go, "Well, companies will restrict what people can access and actually charge you for the amount of data you use." And I go, "So basically, just like your standard internet packages now?" And they go, "Well, what do you mean?" And it's like, well, don't you pay your internet providers for access to the internet at a certain upload speed and a certain download speed? And they say you can have this many gigabytes per this amount of time. And they're like, well, yeah. And it's like, is that changing at all? And they're like, well, no. And I go, now, what you have people arguing is that you will see service providers start packaging sites. So say you want access to Google, say you want access to YouTube, say you want access to this site or that site, they would actually turn that into a package that you would have to pay for to get that. But that seems wildly alarmist because it would require a lot of those sites to coordinate with one another as if they were cable packages. And I don't think they would, because that's not what their target markets want. What we want is more service and hopefully more competition for getting better service. But what we choose to access should still be left up to us. And that's always been the case here in Canada. And I think in the States, that's not going to change either. All you're going to see is potentially more competition over who can do what, and a little bit more, let's say, honesty on the behalf of the providers to say, hey, look, these companies that use large amounts of data have to pay for the large amounts of data they use. Ergo, things like Netflix might go up in price because we're going to charge them for the bandwidth that they're using. And yeah, so once again, I see it as a lot of hot air over something which is essentially a service provision clause, and how much are you going to have to pay for the services you get.
I see that's pretty fair. Well, and on that note, do you think that because of the as your whoever was putting that, oh, it's paying for what you use, do you think that maybe now we're seeing the downfall of cable once and for all?
Um, that's a tough thing to sort of look into your crystal ball about, because cable would seem to be just adapting. So, are we going to see the end of the major news networks? Probably not. Are we going to see the end of different brand names owned by large channel or large conglomerates that try and cater to certain audiences? Probably not, or at least not within this year. So maybe we'll see more contraction in terms of people watching TV, but that doesn't mean that, let's say, shows and whatnot are going to disappear. They'll just probably migrate.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, speaking of TV, did you hear about the Disney and Fox merger? And if so, did you have any are you for or against that whole thing?
That was one where I was actually, I was totally guilty of not waiting long enough to start voicing an opinion on. Because when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, that means Fox is gone. And it's like, we don't want Disney, which already owns ABC, controlling another major news network. But that's totally not what happened. So I had to backtrack a bit on that and read the articles. And it's like, okay, so Disney has bought the rights to 21st Century Fox and some of its subsidiaries, which is largely the cinema aspect of the Fox company or corporation. And what that does is give them access to the rights for a whole bunch of characters and a whole bunch of intellectual properties, which used to belong to things which now are a part of the Disney family, whether that be Star Wars, whether that be Marvel, or just some external rights. But they also buy the productive capability of 21st Century Fox as well. So what does that really mean? Well, seems Disney is the powerhouse within the movie industry and also within the large-scale production industry of television shows for all ages. But thankfully, they didn't sell the news aspect of the company. That will still be running independently of whatever went on with this acquisition. My biggest concern is actually, will there still be more Deadpool movies? Because Disney is not okay with R-rated ratings on their products. And the thing which made the first Deadpool movie work so well was that it could have an R rating or an 18A rating.
Yeah, that's true. I'd be very sad if they didn't make it. Or let me rephrase. I'd be very sad if Deadpool 2 was PG-13, one or two F-bombs and no grotesque violence, because those are all things that made the movie so enjoyable to watch. So yes, I'd be very sad to hear that. I agree. I am not for Disney owning Fox. That would not be a good idea overall there. But I don't know. Hopefully, maybe with Disney on the reins of the superhero movies, if it's all kind of in one roof and under one house, they'll be able to pump out better movies. Because obviously, right now Marvel is killing it, and DC just is not doing very well at all. But and actually, I saw I think it was Thor Ragnarok. I think that was the last movie I saw in theaters this year, and I thought overall it was a good movie. So I don't know. Do you think that with Disney buying all of the or all of those characters, do you think we're in for maybe some good times with the new superheroes, or for some cool cameos or other join up creations in the movie realm potentially next year as well?
Possibly, absolutely, yeah. I think the big problem with Disney owning all of the big IPs right now, though, is uh, you're going to get fatigue. So if you're producing, at least four superhero movies a year, and you're producing at least one Star Wars movie every other year, uh, a lot of these assets will actually start depreciating in value, or at least in terms of viewership after a certain amount of time, just because people will be like, "Oh, more of the same. Oh, more of the same." So if you don't have anybody to, let's say, compete against within that space, you run the risk of damaging your own property. I don't think we're quite at that level of saturation yet, but I know it's like, so Spider-Man came out this year. I thought it was pretty good. Um, what other ones? So Ragnarok came out. I thought it was largely pretty good. Probably my favorite Thor movie to date. But what other Marvel movies came out this year as well?
Guardians too.
Guardians 2, which was once again pretty good. But that's
Um,
four major movies in one year, and it's like, oh dear, that's a lot to deal with.
Wonder Woman came out this year.
Oh yeah,
Um,
the so far the most solid DC movie.
oh, well, speaking of which, Justice League came out this year.
Yeah, not one of the more solid DC movies.
Well, since we're on, did you see and or enjoy the Justice League or no?
I have not gone to see it. I've read all the reviews and things like that, and it it doesn't fix any of the problems which I think DC is suffering with. Most of which is that their characters need to be developed before you throw them into a big crossover movie. And the only character who's really been developed under the news cycle has been Superman over two movies, but he's kind of blasé. I don't particularly like Zack Snyder's approach to the story elements of the DC films. He's a great cinematographer, but the story elements seem to fall behind, and we have a lot of hackneyed villains and a lot of posing for posing's sake kind of thing. And that's not great, because DC has some really good characters, but they needed to be explored a bit more. Because then you throw them into the Justice League thing, and it's like, okay, who's this? What do they do? Why is Aquaman now like super bro? Why is Wonder Woman kind of underutilized? Why is it that Superman had to die and you bring him back the very next movie for like a 10-second scene where he fights the rest of the Justice League, and then all of a sudden he's like, oh, wait, I'm a good guy. Sorry, I forgot.
Oh, well, there's a spoiler. I didn't realize that was gonna happen.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's some interesting stuff. But I'm scrolling down through here, and so in March we had a couple things happening. So the UN was talking about how we're still facing one of the biggest humanitarian crises, with about 20 million people at risk of starvation and famine. We are also in the wake of the Brexit negotiations. So on March 29th, we had the United Kingdom decide to have a referendum on leaving the European Union. And this has been hanging over us for the rest of the year because it hasn't happened yet.
Hmm.
But it's got a bit of a neat parallel with what Trump is currently doing with the UN, where we have a nation essentially going to a supranational body, a body of many nations, right? And saying, hey guys, we want more autonomy because we don't think your leadership is actually good for us in the long term, because we will lose our own intrinsic identity as a nation and not necessarily for the betterment of it. And so the British people are still really torn about this, but at the beginning of the year, you had the likes of Sargon of Akkad and other major YouTubers trying to get in on the political action for this and try to speak out for Brexit, even though it was wildly unpopular within the British media.
Interesting. I honestly, the whole Brexit thing, I'm not very informed about, so you might have to review over that one with me real quick again.
So essentially, Great Britain had a referendum on whether or not they wished to continue to be part of the European Union and the economic Eurozone. Because the centralized government for the European Union was essentially trying to enforce policies that would take the power away from the British Parliament and would reduce the amount of power that Britain had over itself and its regulation of its economy, its regulation of its laws, and other stuff like that. There was also a problem with the European Union having a separate set of laws through which it governs itself, which the member states don't actually vote on. So you have basically an undemocratic, unelected institution that can create its own laws, and those laws will directly affect your country, and you don't have the right to say no within those confines. But yeah, so kind of a tricky thing, but it's not a settled thing. They still haven't figured out exactly what separation is going to look like, and it's still a very contentious topic within the EU and within Britain itself.
Wow, no, well, and to be just to be clear, I know of the event. I know that it was a huge deal, and I guess ended up being on the other side of I know that things are happening. It sounds crazy, but the details on my end were very, very short, I guess. So I definitely knew it was a big deal, but yeah, it was kind of like, I mean, net neutrality. When I heard about it, like, oh, it's internet and stuff's happening. So yeah, it was a lot of smoke, and I didn't see the fires, but that makes much more sense when you put it that way. So hopefully
Mhm.
that gets cleared up. I guess hopefully next year, maybe.
No, for sure. What are some other topics that you are interested in there, AAA?
Well, overall, you covered a few of them with the on the political end, and then I mentioned a few of the ones I saw technology wise, which I think would be interesting to do. The well, I don't know. I'm really hoping that because of all the craziness and I mean, yeah, I guess that's the best word for it is craziness over what's been going on this year. I hope that people are finally kind of realizing that uh, things are not as hunky dory. Well, let me rephrase. I don't think that people are going to be. Maybe they won't freak out as much about what's going on overall in the nation. I think that was one of the biggest issues this year was just the media blows something up, everyone else blows up, and then everyone else who reads and is informed kind of goes, "Why are you doing this?" So I'm hoping that this was the year to kind of spout and be crazy, and next year will be kind of, "Hey, was it worthwhile? Do we need to do things? This is okay." I like the fact that this year there have been several news, or I guess smaller third-party news outlets that have grown a lot and said, "Hey, we're better than they are for these obvious reasons," kind of deal. So that's been pretty cool. And I don't know. Overall, it's been. I guess the only downside to see, and referring back to your the movie conversation was just like you said, the market is very saturated. I think that's true in certain cases. On the one hand, yes. On the other hand, I do think that because the Marvel movies are so loved, people, like you said, they're not tired of them yet, and they do a good job of connecting things and having good characters, and that's the magic of having, the Iron Man, the Avengers, the Guardians, because yes, they're kind of known to those who read comics, and they might be mentioned in a game or two, but mostly if you don't watch those things, then you're not going to know them, which is their advantage, which is why they work out so well. So I'm glad that they're keeping consistency, having fun, and staying true to the character and that kind of thing, which is really cool to do. At the same time, unless it's a Marvel superhero movie or maybe a movie or based on a book or something that I've not or that I have heard of, overall movie wise, I've kind of zoned out just because it's a lot of uh, some of it's propaganda that I just don't care about, and otherwise it's kind of just been the same regurgitation of things. Would you say that might be true there, Duff? With repetition in stories.
Yeah, no, that's always the danger. Is essentially you get a certain plot outline, and they just change the characters and be like, okay, now this is a Thor movie. Okay, now this is a Spider-Man movie. Okay, now this is a Black Panther movie, and it's essentially the same thing. I know the criticism for Marvel for the last little while is that the villains end up being the least interesting part of what's going on, and partially because the only villain which has managed to hop movies consistently has been Loki, and they've kind of grayed him out a bit. He's not as villainous. And, you know, Tom Hiddleston is a great actor. I really enjoy him and what he's been doing with that character. But I would still agree with that. So they have a formula, but in that formula, it starts to wear a little bit thin because you know the villain's going to be the villain of the month, and they're going to disappear. That might change with Infinity War, which I hope it does. I would like to see them bring back some people like Hugo Weaving as Red Skull and actually give him a slightly different set of things to work with. And I would also like to see them bring back Hela, and I think they could. There's a bunch of stuff going on there, but it'll probably start playing out in the next couple of years where people just go, this is a bit too much, and we might see a bit of a hero hiatus. And I'm not opposed to that, just because I feel like I'm being overwhelmed a bit. And the tricky bit for me is that what's been going on in the comics themselves hasn't been all that great. So even though we're getting a lot of good movie content, the comic stuff, which is the basis from which the movies is being, backward engineered, is not the best at the moment. And I think that'll eventually start playing into what we see in the big screen. And that's when it'll be like, time to find something else.
Let's see. I'm sorry, going back to wait. So you want Helena to come back into Infinity War? Was that your comment?
Yeah, I'd like to see Hela come back. I'd like to see Red Skull come back. And either in Infinity War or post Infinity War, depending on what goes on.
Right. Did not to be, I guess, critical, but didn't she like? And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen that Thor Ragnarok, it's a good movie. So sorry, this is kind of a spoiler, but I mean, you also probably saw this coming. Wasn't Helena? Didn't she kind of like do her thing, and isn't she kind of gone since at the end of Thor Ragnarok? So, I mean, would she be able to come back?
I would think she would, because even within the movie context, Asgardians are hella hard to kill, especially if they're a royal family member. So we've seen Thor get the snot kicked out of him several times, and he's always popped back. Loki has been thought dead on 2 separate occasions, and he's popped back. And so when you have the literal goddess of death dying or appearing to die off screen, that's probably a sign she's not dead.
That's fair. That was a good. No, I agree. I like that movie a lot overall. I think it was very well put together, and I think it has the. I believe this is also kind of a spoiler, but not really. The ending, or I'm sorry, it was one of the ending scenes in Thor Ragnarok. I believe is a opener to trying to connect Thor to Guardian. So we'll see how that whole. Which, speaking of which,
Yeah,
and I might have asked this from you before. Have you seen the trailer to Infinity War yet?
I have.
Did that give you hope?
And Thanos looks cool. He's got my attention. I don't know why they made Black Widow blonde.
Oh, see, I haven't seen that part of it yet, so I don't. I know that Captain's got a beard. Uh, I think that was the majority of the things I didn't see. Again, I didn't see the trailer yet because I figured if it's cool, then I might be able to see it in theaters overall. And then, and just I don't know how accurate this. I believe they're supposed to make 1, 2, and potentially 3 Infinity War movies, maybe, and then they'll be kind of not necessarily done, but I think the actors' contracts expire after that, so they'll have to reboot
Oh
something.
yeah.
Do,
Well,
is that accurate to you there,
the
Jeff?
the big thing is anytime you're using real people, they will age out of the roles, and become less interested and whatnot. So the idea that the Avengers that we were introduced to with the first Avengers movie will always be the Avengers as we see them is not likely to happen, especially when we're talking about live action films. So we will see people disappear and become less important, and maybe could become more bit players as it goes on. And think like between this movie and the next Infinity War, I think it's another 2 years, right?
I haven't looked at the calendar, but that sounds because you've got well, let's see, you've got I believe February of next year is Black Panther, and then I think is Infinity War, but I could be wrong about that.
No, for
I don't
sure.
have the schedule in front of me.
Yeah, so
Um,
like the fact that they're going to age out and eventually have to bring in new people, that's to be expected. You just hope that they do it well and they don't have to go back and redo all the origin stories again. It's like, so, bring back Wolverine, get a guy who's actually 5'8" to play him, and don't give me the origin story. Just give me Wolverine as being Wolverine and go. Because we've already seen where Wolverine's come from a couple times. In the same way, it's kind of like, okay, once Chris Evans gets tired of Captain America, just let him go on, and keep Captain America doing Captain America things. Whoever comes in to replace him, it's this constant need to re-explain the universes that drives me nuts. It's like, you don't actually need to tell us every single time that, let's say that Black Widow is a former Russian secret agent. It's like, okay, no, that's fine. Just tell us once, don't tell us again. We get it. Or that, what's his face? That the Winter Soldier eventually will become Captain America. And then eventually he won't be Captain America anymore. Just let it happen, kind of thing. So they can do a lot of stuff, but the thing which they're going to have to deal with is how do we adjust for changing out actors over time and not having to re-explain the origins of the character.
yeah, that sounds fair. Well, speaking of switching out at characters or actors, I should say, did you see Logan by chance?
I did.
And what did you think of that one?
I thought it was a solid movie within the X-Men universe as we've seen it online. In the movies. I liked it. I especially liked the actress who played X-23. I thought she kind of embodied it well, and I'm glad it got a hard R rating because we got to see Wolverine doing what Wolverine does best, which is cutting people up and stuff like that. The only sort of weakness in that entire movie, and so spoilers for those who haven't seen it, is it becomes mighty convenient that the kids who have the X-Men's powers at the end of the movie decide not to use the X-Men's powers to try and save themselves.
Yeah. Wait, what do you mean to save themselves?
So when they're running through the woods, it's like, oh my gosh, we're being hunted down. This is so terrible. It's like, wait a second. We know for a fact one of you has Magneto's power. Can't you just, rip the guns out of the people's hands? Oh, wait, we know one of you has Quake's power. You can literally shake the earth. Why are you so worried about these people following you? And that's where it just becomes sort of sloppy writing. It's like, oh, we need people to be in danger. And it's like, well, then you have to make the villains a little bit more problematic, to say the least. So I thought that was sort of the weakest part of the movie, was that sort of end scene lead up to Wolverine actually being killed off.
Right. I mean, I guess, I don't know. On the one hand, I agree. On the other hand, I can also say that they were afraid in general, and they've always been in that kind of, I mean, again, spoilers if you haven't seen the movie yet. Given the fact of how they grew up, I mean, I can kind of see it's like I'm not sure if you've ever heard the story with a baby elephant, but and as I understand it, when circus performers train elephants, they start them out as a baby elephant, if you will, and they lock them up, and the baby elephant tries and tries and tries to escape and just can't do it. Well, as the baby elephant grows and becomes an adult, it no longer tries to escape because it has in its mind the fact that it couldn't do it before. Why would things be different now? So that might be the mentality of I've always known this soldier has been stronger than me. I've never used my powers for this thing, so maybe it's not worthwhile. Because again, at the end of the movie, you see, oh hey, I'm brave now. Let's go and get this one guy. All of us are against him, and then power things happen. So is that a fair comment? Do you
Oh,
think?
I can take that as an in-house explanation, but the problem with that explanation is then how do you explain X-23 murdering people right, left, and center and not caring?
Well. To be fair, though, again, because in the movie she was the leader of the escaping, so she was already kind of the uh, innocent. I'm not sure what's going on, and then of course, oh hey, these are my friends. This is my breaking point. Okay, whatever else. And then again, she was kind of on her lonesome with Logan for the whole movie, and then she comes back to her people. So I definitely see your points. That would be my only kind of maybe this happened explanation kind of deal. So she's always been the uh, determined leadership kind of thing, and they've always kind of been the let's try to just save our skin kind of deal. So just different.
Well, do you know what the even bigger problem with that is from a continuity perspective? Why is it that only
It was a good
X-23
movie.
speaks Spanish as their first language, whereas the other mutants who are also grown in that lab all speak English perfectly?
Well, I think there was also, and this is not covered in the movie very well, but I believe that X-23 had a since she was so advanced, she because it wasn't okay, and I have not read the comics. I am not an expert in Marvel comics at all, but I believe I had read before that she was in general just very gifted. So take that with however you will. No, I don't want to keep going down. The more I say, the more questions I can't answer. This is just a she was a cool character in my mind, which was
Oh,
pretty.
she is. I definitely agree. AAA. X-23 is one of my favorite Marvel characters. Just out and out. But should we jump back to the year and look at some more big
That
happenings?
sounds good. Anything else crazy wise, or any other burning topics that you we haven't covered on your end?
Well, we're only up to April, so let's see what we get through.
Okay,
So
good.
remember back in April, President Trump authorized the launching of 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles into Syria. And on April 13th, he authorized the use of a MOAB explosive to drop on an ISIL base in Afghanistan.
I do remember that. That was a big deal because that was the Twitter feed of why did you call it a tomahawk? I'm insulted.
Yeah. And that ended up being a bit of a tricky story because it ends up being he said, she said, they said, who said. But Syria itself has been such a quagmire. And it's never good to say, like, okay, it just happens. It's just over there in the Middle East. But it becomes really hard to sort of piece out who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, and who we should really be looking towards, because Assad, his regime is a bad regime. The people who want to replace him are largely not motivated by good reasons, and so we have the president launching missiles at Assad and still fighting other groups within Syria, and I think that's just one of those ones where nobody wins.
Yeah, that's fair. It was a yeah. I could have been handled differently, and yeah, it's a bit of a mess. But uh, yeah, I don't even know how to go from there. It's been quite a fiasco, and he has Twitter, which maybe he should have less of Twitter access to overall. But I mean, I don't know. Overall, I think the intention was good, right?
Well, I think it's one of those ones where if we go back to April, this is where we see Trump starting to go with the policy of let the soldiers lead from ahead, as opposed to Obama's perspective, which was I'm going to lead from behind. So by giving the military the ability to function on their own and to make use of their assets as they see fit, we see Trump starting to gain some momentum towards what would lead to the eventual defeat of ISIL and the destruction of the Islamic State as a regional power. And so it's like, this is kind of the baby steps, like literally saying to the military, you can use that huge non-nuclear bomb to destroy an ISIL base, which is buried deep in a mountain. And that's something which President Obama wouldn't be likely to say because he would think too much about possible casualties and other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, which is good to think about. But then it's obviously this war has been going on for definitely long enough, and I don't know. Like I said, hopefully it sounds like things are getting better. So I mean, that's just so I guess you would agree with Trump's decision is probably better off then.
Well, I think it's just evidence of his particular ideas towards international intervention seem to be better if you want results as opposed to the, let's say, less direct and also more hesitant policies and policy positions that Obama would adopt. Obama wanted all the power and also at the same time none of the action to be taking place in the war zones, whereas Trump is essentially saying, you guys can do what you need to do. Don't do anything dumb, but I will give you the leeway to do your job because you're well-trained professionals. And if you do your job well, there shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, okay, I see that point too. Well, that's, I mean, I'm glad we have a different president now. I guess is the gist there. That's too many crazy things. Wow. I guess is my only response to that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny because of course off the top of the show I was like, not much interesting happened, but now I'm reading through the interesting stuff. I'm being like, oh yeah,
Well, and it's a lot, but again, I guess to go back to your point of it's just one of those. I guess I'm now kind of so uh uh oversaturated is a bad word. Just so immune to quote unquote news because a lot of it is news, but a lot of it is just fighting about nothing and just blowing smoke. So it's just seems like everything has been happening so much. There's nothing that's like this is actually important, which has been thrown in with this is not important, but we're going to yell about it. So yeah, I think things have happened, but I don't think many. I think very few. Well, not very few, but I think fewer major stories have happened than the news proclaims. So we're just kind of just sick of newness, if that makes sense.
well, and it's just so much that it's hard to make sense of, because as much as there is a move to globalize the world. We're one nation under whatever the global power is. The fact is that regionally, the globe is still a very diverse place, filled with diverse points of view and diverse ways of going about doing things. And part of that is different regions have different understandings about what the best outcome for a situation would be. And so when we try and act unilaterally for some sort of greater good, we run into the problem of whose good are we talking about? Um, and so I think that's one of the more interesting parts that has also given rise to the movements towards like ethno nationalism and stuff, which are going on in the States, but also around the world. And it's going to be tricky to see how that plays out because you have people saying, well, look, we got to look out for our own. And when they say that, who do they actually mean?
Yeah, that's fair. Well, and this is a bit of a side note, but I mean, I don't know, do you think that with all of the infighting and all the not discrepancy, sorry, the just differences of opinion. I mean, shouldn't there be a, hey, you guys think this way, great, we think this way, let's go do our own thing? Or do you think is there a reason why we can't just kind of agree to disagree and part ways? Or why do we always keep having to go and say, I want you to do the thing that I think is right, if that makes sense?
Well, it's tough. And you know, Ben Shapiro, a guy who both of us quite like, rightfully points out that if you can't agree to the definition of a word, and in this case, it would actually be tolerance, and what does that actually mean? Then it becomes really hard to try and figure out what is a good solution or what is a workable solution, or even figuring out places where you can't actually come to a workable solution. And I think the biggest sort of the biggest sort of problem a lot of people have is they will try and force solutions into existence and say that they're good, but when you actually look at what they've done, it's not created a good outcome, but rather an outcome which they think is preferable without actually dealing with what the people involved are actually struggling over or in conflict of. But that's probably something we could do another two podcasts on.
You're probably right. Yeah, I just figured
should
this is something else. But
should we jump to June?
That's probably yes. That's I think they're. I think that not to say that nothing else has happened, but the other major stories maybe we should take a few months jump to. So yeah, sure, go
Yeah,
for June.
yeah, because the whole Ariana Grande thing, uh, not so big, eh? But in June,
No, we can move on.
we have the U.S. withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement.
Wow, that was geez, that seems like a long time. That was a long time ago. That's pretty crazy. That is actually I don't know. Did you see there was a Trump had a tweet about the climate change recently?
Oh, I'd heard about that, but I haven't actually taken a look at it. What actually happened there, AAA?
So and this is of course I'm paraphrasing, but it was essentially something along the lines of certain. Oh, I can't remember if it was a state or a country. They were going through some cold weather or something in those lines. I can't remember exactly who or where, but they were having very cold weather, and he just commented, "Oh, hey, well maybe they need to get some global warming going on there so they can warm up." And then that was, of course, set it on fire with other people talking about climate change and weather, and his definition was incorrect and that kind of thing. But the funny part about that whole thing was Elizabeth Warren sent him a tweet saying, "I stand for science," and then she went on a rant about climate change and a moral cause and all this kind of stuff, which then many people on Twitter said, "You believe in science, but of course you are for, or I'm sorry, you don't believe that a fetus is a living thing, and you also continue to profess your heritage as being Native American." So the whole thing was, it was, Trump doing a great troll, and then Elizabeth Warren just falling down, and it was quite amusing. So I definitely would encourage you to look into that if you if you get some time. But that's that was the debacle, if you will.
Mm. Well, also in June, we have the return of the American student Otto Warmbier, who is the fellow who sadly made the decision to take some paraphernalia down from a room which he shouldn't have been in Korea, North Korea, that is. And then, of course, he gets returned home in a coma.
I do remember that one. Yeah, that's right. That was crazy.
Yeah. And then
Um,
playing through that, we have
yeah, I mean that was handled. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that was that. Do you think it could have been handled any better?
tricky, very tricky. With North Korea, you always need to be aware of what you have been given license to do, and you do not push it because there can be very real consequences for your actions, kind of thing. So it's like Dennis Rodman can go to North Korea and play some b-ball with Kim Jong Un, and be all buddy buddy with them, but if somebody else were to try and go to North Korea and play b-ball with Kim Jong Un, they might end up in a work camp or worse. So,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
yeah, very hard to tell. But sadly, as well, in June, we have a whole bunch of international news coming out of the Middle East. And we have a bunch of stuff going on in Iran with terrorist attacks. And it appears that sort of corresponds with Ramadan, which is traditionally a time where we see a little bit more sectarian tension internationally between some Muslim sects. And that appears to have gone on again this year. But then we also have the cholera outbreak. Do you remember that?
I do. That was a pretty big deal with trying to go and get people in or out of the country, which was a major conflict. And I don't know if there was ever any good resolution, but I do remember that was a big uh it was very big in the news, I guess, to say the least. That was a pretty crazy time. I mean, it didn't really affect me at all, but that was a lot of yelling and screaming, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That kind of ends things for June. July was a bit of a quiet month, except for North Korea. But jumping into August, do you remember the big um, interest in the solar eclipse? We had our first total solar eclipse.
I
For
do remember that. I just remember the fact that everyone thought that was racist.
the eclipse was racist. When was this?
Well, no, I'm sorry. There was the because my roommates went to go and see it because they were really into that kind of stuff, and I just didn't care at all. But no, there was an article talking about the best places to get a glimpse of the eclipse for the full effect, and there was a line or something, and they made a map of what were the best places to go, and there was an article talking about how the best places to go were in areas where, and again, I perused the article. I'm not, I didn't read the whole thing, so I don't know how accurate this is. But I guess the issue was many people thought that the area to get the best view was away from minorities. Therefore, the eclipse and the areas themselves became racist against those people, or something in those lines. Was sounds accurate. So the whole there was a whole hubbub about that as well. It was crazy.
Ah, sounds like the fake news machine was getting going.
Yeah, that's don't remember where it was from. I just saw that and I was like, I really want to be surprised. I really want to be surprised. Nope, that's it didn't work. You guys didn't. That's sounds about as freak-out-ish of anything else. But that's well, was that it for that month then?
Yeah, so we at the end of August, you had Hurricane Harvey, which of course was considered which ended up being one of the big first political attacks on Trump due to his response to it. Um, but yeah, I think that's the last big story for August. Let's see about September here. Um, Irma, hurricane strikes. Hurricane Maria strikes. Uh, and the U.S.-led coalition successfully helps expel ISIS from Mosul. So more military stuff going on.
Awesome.
Now, in October, Xi Jinping gets elected to his second term as the head of the Communist Party of China. And Catalonia declares independence from Spain.
Huh. That is news. That actually is news to me now.
Okay, I guess that actually takes us into November. We have Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe is deposed and placed under house arrest.
I do remember that. That's about all I remember of it. So,
And sadly, a attack in Sinai in Egypt on a mosque sees 305 people killed and more wounded.
yeah, that's right. I wonder how many quote unquote terrorist or just crazy attacks there have been throughout 2017. Not that we have to figure that number now, but I just that how many just oh, by the way, X people were hurt in this situation. I'm like, again, like it's just sad to not be surprised anymore, which is just really depressing.
Hmm. And that actually leads us into December. So we have Russia is banned from the 2018 Olympics in Pyeongchang, Korea. We have the United States officially recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital city. And then we have the Disney company announces the acquisition of most of 21st Century Fox, including the film studio. And Guatemala also recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Wow.
A lot happening,
Wow,
eh?
just no, I mean the only thing I can think of right now that was the quote unquote in the news a whole lot for this month was net neutrality and taxes and I guess the a bit of voting and that kind of thing. So it's just all gone and which it's kind of sad to think that there are so many news stories that you hear about so much that don't really matter, and then so many things that you don't hear that really should matter, and just they're not even at all, which is just really disappointing as well. So overall, I mean, I don't know, given that we just gone through to hear all the news stories, are you hopeful for next year?
Yeah, no, I am still of the opinion that if you're to ask somebody what is the best time to be alive and be human, now would be the best time, and it will continue to be the best time. It's just that going into 2018, I think we're going to see the renegotiation of a lot of long-standing international agreements. We're going to have a serious discussion about the UN and what exactly its role is in the world. Um, and I think we're also going to have to start thinking about what does it mean to be a member of a country versus a member of the world at large in a lot more direct ways than perhaps we did in the previous year. I don't know too much about other stuff. Like it'll be interesting to see what SpaceX comes up with this year. It'll be interesting to see whether or not we have any major tech breakthroughs. But those are all things which I'm not too well informed about.
Right, right. Well, any predictions, good or bad, about the presidency for next year, and or the right keeping the majority, or any big shakeups there?
I actually don't know enough to say. Actually, as an American there, AAA, what are your thoughts?
I think that due to the misinformation and outcries of certain senators of the Democratic Party, they played a hand. They thought they knew what they were talking about. Americans are going to find out that they didn't know what they were talking about, and I don't believe that they are correct when they say, "Oh, hey, you're all going to die. Vote for us. We're better. We know best." And President Trump is just flat out wrong. And they just kind of have the, okay, well, impeachment is coming, like, down with Trump. I don't think that's going to happen. I am. I think worst case scenario, I think Trump will keep the majority in the House and Senate. I don't. I mean, I think that he there will be some losses, Republican wise, and with in some seats, of course. But I think that once, and this was I read Rush Limbaugh's review on Facebook a little while ago about his predictions, and I kind of agree. I think that overall, I believe that they will keep the majorities there, and things should go smoother. And like I said, I think that the Democrats really assumed too much about the what Americans think, and once it's the issue of, here's a bill, you don't know a lot about it, we'll give you this cliff notes from how we feel about it, and then many times Americans don't really know the effects until much later. Now with taxes, they can easily see what's going to change next year, and by that they'll say, oh hey, you told me to attack
Oh, AAA, you still there?
something from this bill, therefore I feel lied to. And maybe the Democrats need to go take a look at themselves and renegotiate and just reevaluate their decisions, which I don't think they're going to do. So I'm hoping that this will give Trump the momentum to good policies and continue with his deregulation, which has been pretty good so far. I can easily see Trump tweeting as much as he has been usually, hopefully more with policy and trying to encourage the American people, which is one of the better speeches he gave when he signed and commented on the tax bill. Was he was clear, he was very optimistic about the bill itself. So that was one of the first times that he's been actually fairly presidential when he presented his work to the American people. So that was pretty cool. I hope that continues on. I hope that the media Either I hope that the media gets better and says, "Hey, we were wrong," or I hope that they get way worse and then just no one listens to them anymore. Which, I mean, not that I want them to be, people work there. I'm not. I don't want people to lose their jobs, but I hope that either they change, or maybe a bigger head in CNN goes, "Hey, we can't do this anymore. Let's change our ways and figure out why we are this way," or we need to get viewers back. So how to do that? And same thing with entertainment. We need to get viewers back and try to understand what made us who we are, kind of deal. So I'm optimistic. I think things are getting better. I'm hoping, like I said, this is just a year of people not getting what they wanted and just yelling and screaming. But again, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe we yell and scream some more, and eventually there should become a tipping point, if you will, to how all this is going to be played out. But I mean, yeah, I'm not. I don't know. Would you say it's pretty hard to tell at this point there, Duff?
Yeah, but I'm optimistic. I think 2018 will be a very interesting year. And if things go well, uh, hopefully no major wars, no major conflicts, and hopefully we see a continuing trend towards prosperity. And the standard of living around the globe continues to go up. So yeah, I think we stand at a crossroads where we get a lot of negative news and we get a lot of content that is put out there to create controversy for controversy's sake, and it's really hard not to get pulled into that. So I think my hope for this year is that people keep on getting more savvy about what they're being sold in the media, and that people continue to look to other sources and try and get alternative points of view on things so they can make decisions for themselves that are well informed.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty fair. Well, then, lastly for you, the Duff, is there to be optimistic? Then, do you think that there's one or maybe two things that uh, Trump, the media, or anyone can do potentially to make sure that there is a good, solid? Or we know we'll just go with Trump to keep it simple. Do you think that there's one or maybe two things that uh, Mr. Trump can do, say, or who, whatever, to um, deliver some small smidgen of hope for us overall?
Well, I'll go with the Ben Shapiro method when it comes to President Trump. Uh, if he would stay off of Twitter more and tweet less and less frequently, then I think it will become extremely hard, or at least more difficult, for people who want to go after him for reasons that are not entirely ideologically neutral, won't be able to do that as much. And I have a feeling if that happens, what we'll end up having is a presidentship, which will essentially be a typically Republican presidency with a lot of emphasis being put on keeping the economy strong. And if the American economy is strong, then Canada benefits, and then America's trade partners benefit, and indirectly the world will benefit. But it's, can the president of the United States be mature enough just to let things be and let his results speak for themselves?
That's pretty good. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty awesome. I mean, I agree with the majority of that. I think overall, I wish that maybe, I mean, Trump's a brander, so I wish that he would just brand all of his tweets to be, yes, I agree. I think that him tweeting about random stuff is bad, but at the same time, Trump's gonna be Trump, so I doubt that'll happen. But I wish that he would do more tweeting about his great accomplishments and brand them well that way. And I think that would be the goal, to make sure that, people know, hey, he is doing what we voted him to do. Because right now, the two big things he said he was going to do, he has done them. It took him the whole year, but he got them done. And I think that if he keeps explaining himself very concisely and, just not taking it from the media, I think that's a sign that things are going to, I guess, stay pretty good. But yeah, overall, I think it's been an interesting year, and I look forward to what will be happening for the next year. But anyway, I think that, of course, we've gone through the year there so far, Duff. I think there's any last words for you?
No, but how about you, AAA? What are your last words for 2018? Sorry, 2017.
I was just say, well, that's crazy. No, I think it's been good. I think we've learned a lot, and I hope that there are. Um, I hope that there is more learning that happens next year. That's the biggest thing, whether it be politically or not. I think we need to take time to learn, and by learn, I'm basically just mean we need to start not being so uh, instant gratification is great for buying maybe a product, maybe a service, but instant gratification for information is very, very bad, and we've learned that very well this year. So hopefully we've knocked that drug out of our system and can be cured in some fashion for next year. So we'll see how it goes. But anyway, yeah, I think overall that's pretty good. So like I said, we've covered the year in depth fairly well. So thank you very much again, Duff, for joining me. I appreciate that. YouTube. We will see you guys next year. So have a great new year, and yeah, we'll see you next time. All right, Duff, say goodbye.
All right, have a good year there, guys.
All right, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much. We'll see you next year.